Okay, countdown. And we are live. So good afternoon and good morning and good evening, UMAC community here on Zoom or following this live on YouTube or anytime, anywhere in the world. I'm delighted to welcome you to our third webinar of UMAC post-lockdown series, where every Friday we discuss one topic of relevance to university museums and collections, as so many of them across the world are reopening to the public or planning to. So today's topic is lockdown lessons, going digital. So some of the questions we want to address are, during lockdown, did your university museum, science center, botanic garden remain active online? Was your university museum prepared? Did you feel that you were prepared for going online? What technological, logistical, content challenges did going online pose to your institutions? And what lessons did we learn, you learn, and to share with us for the future? So we have many participants, I'm sure all eager to speak, and the experiences are important to share, but time is limited, so I ask you for succinctness and briefness. We will be moderated today by Jill Deupi, Director of the Lower Art Museum of the University of Miami, and Mark Osterman, Digital Experience Manager and Head of Education at the Lower. Thank you so much, Jill and Mark, for this, and over to you.
Thank you, Marta. And I just want to echo Marta's words of welcome. And I do want to say that even though, as some of you may have heard me say when we were first getting organized here, even though the next 75 minutes have the designated theme of the digital pivot, really it is a forum for exchanging ideas and for finding resources and support, and frankly, just commiserating a little bit, because there are many strands of multiple crises that we are all grappling with at the moment. I want to take just 2 minutes to give you a quick history of where the low has been since March 16th, just so you have context. So March 16th, we pivoted to an all remote work arrangement. We were notified the preceding Friday that that would be the case. Fortunately, my team was able to make the move to all remote work very, very rapidly. We continue to be in an all remote work phase. Our operations are suspended on the campus. Summer school classes are digital, and only essential personnel have returned at this point. We are supposed to be bringing our students back in early August, and that is when I hope that only my essential team members will return to campus, because the virus is still doing what it's doing. I'm really not rushing to bring my team back for their sake, as well as the sake of our students and our patrons. We, of course, also in the United States have the added twist of the racial riots. I think that the underlying issues are critical, and I'm very, very happy to see that our nation is addressing them in a very serious and profound, if painful way. But of course, this also adds new elements and new complexities in terms of social distancing and the virus. We are one of 6 states that is currently spiking, mostly in the Sun Belt. So we're watching and waiting to see what happens here. The low is incredibly fortunate that about 9 months, I would say, before all of this happened, we made a new hire with support from one of our foundations, the Knight Foundation here in the US, that allowed us to hire Dr. Mark Osterman as our head of digital engagement. He has now been promoted to our director of education, which probably tells you everything you need to know about how invaluable his work and his services have been for us. Truly a godsend in every way. And so without further ado, I want to pass the proverbial microphone over to Mark, who's going to give you a quick overview of some of the most significant digital initiatives that we have undertaken in the last 3 months. And then I do believe also we're going to be hearing from Gustavo Ortiz Serrano from Bogota. Is that correct? Yeah, okay, perfect. So Mark, take it away.
Great, well, thank you, Jill, and thank you, Marta. Thanks everyone for getting on. It's great to have such a global group for this discourse. So what I'm gonna do is be pretty brief, just go over some of the digital initiatives we got involved in over the past 3 months at the low. And Martha, thank you. So I'm going to run through these slides to Martha's directive pretty quickly, thinking about what happened and what we did. And so when everything hit and we immediately went remote at the University of Miami, it was really this situation of reacting as opposed to responding. And so the way I differentiate those two things is just reacting without that much reflection, thought, or strategy, and responding does incorporate those. There's nothing wrong with reacting. It was necessary. But you know, if anything I've learned over the last 3 months, it's great to now slow down and figure out how to truly respond in a strategic and long-term manner. But I do think one of the things that we did, and the first thing that we did, which you can see here, is under strategic, when we went remote, we created the Remote Engagement Task Force. So we were charged to investigate and recommend ways to strengthen both on-site and remote engagement across all facets of the institution. And what I did to chair this and pull this group together was that it essentially represents somebody from every department of the museum. So it's collections and exhibitions, marketing, education, membership, advancement, etc. And the point to that is somewhat obvious, but really important. So thinking deeply about the technologies we were using, the choices we were making, and how we could leverage those across the entirety of the institution. This group has been effective. We've been meeting every week since mid-March. We're now migrating to bi-weekly because I think we have effective communication, protocols and guidelines in place, and we're able to sort of ease back and again start responding as opposed to reacting so quickly. But it's really set a tone for us, and this group, its intention is to remain intact even when we return back to the museum. I think we all realize there's no going back to what it was. There will be a new normal, and how we think about and engage with digital and our visitors will just be slightly different. So from there, we quickly realized, you know, again, baseline reaction, what do we need to do? We need to amp up and work a bit on our website because we're going to be directing people there. We want some experiences there. So what I did is in the chat, the first comment in our chat today has a link to our digital engagement page at the Lowe's website to give you a sense. Almost all of those experiences, not all of them, but maybe 2/3 of them we created over the past 3 months, but they incorporate things like digital exhibitions, a program called Art Lab. This was an existing program where we had an exhibition that was supposed to take place. Art Lab, as you can see, is an annual student curated exhibition that provides UM students hands-on experience and working directly with curatorial at the museum to create an exhibition based on the research they do. Its culminating activity is an on-site exhibition. All of that got canceled, and we had to pivot immediately to a digital platform. And that created an interesting opportunity of working closely with the students and also just thinking about how the new form of exhibition could possibly be a bit more immersive and multimedia. So again, it's figuring out how, you know, rather than problems, there are solutions, and figuring out again how to leverage the technology to take advantage of something. We now know moving forward that in all likelihood, there will be a well thought out and comprehensive digital component to Art Lab going forward. So again, something beneficial out of all this craziness that happened. Another project briefly, Your Voice. This is a way we're interested in thinking about diversity, equity, inclusion at the museum. There's so many ways to approach that internally, through programs, through interpretation. This is really about interpretation, breaking down hierarchies, figuring out how to get the community's voices into the work we do. So there's a digital experience that you would find on our page that helps capture these voices. Those will currently be going into a digital interactive that's currently under development. There's another program, this was developed slightly before, Animating Antiquity, but again, thinking about how can we make immersive experiences available to people online. These were 3D documented pieces from our antiquities collection. And they allow you to manipulate and spin these pieces around and also gather and gain information. And then lastly, what's listed here again was a very quick reaction, really simple, not redefining anything or doing anything intensely innovative, but LOTG is low on the go. And that was a way, once we closed, we wanted our constituents, our members, have access to the museum. So on a daily basis, we were giving them essentially a dose of art with an amount of interpretation. So we did that for about probably 2 months. It was exhausting, and that reaction was needed to be moderated. We turned it and put it into a strategic plan of social media, where now it's done on a weekly basis, and we've reached out to a community of scholars and other colleagues who make weekly contributions to that program. So again, something that came out of this that we look at now being part of our general operating procedures, fit strategically into our social media strategic plan as well. You can go to the next slide, Martha. So once we had some, and all of this, again, none of this was reinventing the wheel. This is just getting us up to speed, having some foundation, some structure that if we're directing people to our website, that there are real digital engagement components there and ways for people to interact. We then immediately started looking at our programming. And so these are just a few programs. I'll again try to go through this very quickly, that we needed to pivot and turn virtual. So one of those programs is centered in mindfulness. We have a program where we have mindful sessions that take place on site at the museum. Those are conducted by mindfulness specialists and faculty members at UM. And then they alternate the next week in a program we call Artful Mindfulness. So that's using works of art to go through a mindfulness session. So prolonged looking and observation facilitated experience. So something that is relatively new and pretty innovative. Not that many museums are adapting mindfulness in that way. And this was an amazing experience where people seem to really need and want a mindfulness experience during everything we've been going through. So our numbers really jumped through the roof, and making it virtual really opened it up in terms of access for people to be able to come to and attend the program. So we've been having participants now ranging anywhere between 40 up to about 80 people, and we're doing this every week. We've been doing other basic programs and just switching those to digital. I think everyone, and we'll talk about this further, how whether it's an exhibition or a lecture, everything does not transfer or adapt well to digital. And so that includes the idea of virtual exhibitions. Just putting the work now in a digital platform may make the work accessible, but it may not make it engaging, interesting, or impactful. So really have to be strategic moving forward, but we just felt we really needed to be able to make these offerings not in clear understanding when people would be back in the museum. So the guided virtual interactive discussions, the virtual professional development workshops, and the Low Connects, they're all a variety of programs that we're essentially now offering either through Zoom or Microsoft Teams to help reach our members and our community. We can go to the last slide, Martha. So this is really just getting to some of the strategy and moving forward and what we're thinking about. And some of this can guide, hopefully, a bit of where our discourse goes. So I just broke this up into these 3 areas. How to reach new audiences and enhance membership. So thinking about strategic planning for new digital and communication and marketing, consistent membership programming, and engaging with equity and access in mind. So again, thinking about, we've been involved on site deeply about diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. Now we're switching to so much virtual and online. Often these platforms do not take accessibility into their development or how they're used. And so we just need to really think deeply about accessibility, but also how to leverage them to increase diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we need to really think about reimagining our programming. I won't go through all of these bullets here. And also how to reimagine our content. And those ideas about reimagining programming and content, I think, are things that we can really talk about moving forward. And the last things I just want to mention, which aren't in here, that I've been thinking a lot about in terms of returning and the challenges are, again, leveraging the technology to really think about inclusion and equity. Thinking, actually, I know this is really boring, kind of prosaic, but thinking about our point of sale system and how that works with interaction with people coming on site. How can we go about, whether it's cashless interactions, time ticketing, and other methods for thinking about social distancing that might need to take place on site. I've also been thinking deeply about wayfinding. And also, again, what role technology can have in that. So we've been having discussions. We'll want people going through our museum now in a particular direction to help us adhere to continued and future social distancing. And lastly, this other thing that we can talk about in a larger group, the challenges of in-gallery touchscreen interactives. And how do those work and what do we do with them? And I'll just give a small anecdote. I was on a listserv that was talking about these, and someone had thought that there was a decent, it wasn't really a solution, but how stylists could be used for this. And those stylists range from things that could be given away or returned. And then it was all of these discussions. I had to clean them with UV light, or if they were given away, this and that. The discussion went on for about 20 people. And then someone finally chimed in and discussed what the accessibility challenges and issues are for a stylist and the amount of dexterity needed to use them, that if you simply just switched over to them, that would be cutting out an entire audience and constituency. So I just brought that up to show something that's representative of the complexities of everything we need to go through. So that kind of summarizes where we are, and I hope sets up a bit of a context for our discussion.
Thank you, Mark. 3 months of work in 10 minutes or less. Bravo. So we are next going to hear from Gustavo Ortiz, who's the director of the Museo de Arte Contemporáneo de Bogotá.
Good pronunciation.
And before we hear from Gustavo, if you don't have yourself on mute, could you please take a moment to do so, because we are picking up some background noise. Thank you.
Okay. I am ready now. Okay. Okay, thank you, Marta. Okay, our museum plans a lot of digital strategies, but not at this moment. Before this moment, a special moment, we, if you like, Marta, go to the next, to the timeline. Okay, in 2004, we start with a special page only in PDF, talking about the work of the week. We analyze our collection, and we start in the museum days of this year. And then in 2006, we made a Festival of Contemporary Arts. This is a festival that congregate or to show the different types of digital manifestations at this year. And in 2000, we use our web page, and then we put our first catalog on YouTube, and start the share our publication on digital way. And in 2010, our first fan page on Facebook, and in 2011 we start our agreement with Google Arts and Culture. For us, it's a big step to go more digital. And 2011 we start our YouTube channel with a few interviews on records of our exhibitions. And in 2012, we made an agreement with the National Minister of Culture in Colombia to be more inclusive. And we made a special sing language, Colombian sing language, and Braille to put around our museum inside and outside, because we have a sculptural space, and both have QR codes and Braille things to access blind people and people with different disabilities. And we put the special map in our university in order to the people have access to the museum. The next slide, please, Marta. Uh, and 2014, we made a special exhibition, Digital Analogy, and our special guest is the Professor Scott from Britain, and we made a more engaged with the digital practices in art and made more in deep in digital uh, contents for our museum. In uh, 2016 is our 15th anniversary, and we made a special documentary and video and interactive, and we work more in deep with QR codes and more digital uh, curatorships with in agreement with Google platforms. And in 2017, we resigned our web page, more a launch page, because in the past the web page are more informative, and now it's more launch page for different kinds of content. And 2018 is the visit of peers of accreditation. We start our accreditation with the American Alliance of Museums in 2012, and this is the first visit. And the last year in Kyoto, we share our experience with a Barrio Museum neighborhood uh, that we made a special relationship with our neighborhood, because our museum is inside of a neighborhood in the periphery of Bogota, and it's very kind, different of other museums, because it's more engaged with the people. And finally, this year and on March, we obtained the recognition of AAM International Accreditation. And for us, it's a very big challenge to work more in deeply with digital and presential relationship with our publics. The next year is our 55th anniversary. And okay, goes to the next, Marta, please. And what is our strategy? And at this moment, we made a lot of Skype interviews with artists of our collection. Some of them are around the world. In this case, we made a special interview with Carlos Castro, is a teacher of San Diego University, and we made out other interviews with artists in Milan and Amsterdam, Spain, Argentina, and to know how the artists um, take the opportunity of this special time, and how they more engage with the digital, or how they made his work at this special time. And the second is we made a special virtual curatorships for, it's a curiosity, because we made a lot of curatorship before this situation, and it's a anecdotic that the actual exhibition uh, hybrid identities was 1 year before online, and we plans to make before online the exhibition, and then we made in the space of the museum. And these three exhibitions was the 1 year ago, and is for us a proof to engage the people before the exhibition. And fortunately, actually, these exhibitions are online, and for us, it's very pleasure to know that the people are engaged with the exhibitions online. Also, we made a live broadcast on our page, on the page of the university. As you know, our museum belongs to the Uniminuto University, one of the largest university in Colombia. And we start at this time to make some proofs of podcast, uh, similar to describe works, or made some themes about art and contemporary situations. And also we use indeed the social network strategy with Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and we have all our publication of the last 18 years free on our digital repository on ISU. You can find all our catalogs, books, a lot of information about our publication. As first we made in the real world, but we made a special copy in PDF that is accessible to everybody on ISU platform. And also, of course, this kind of webinars, conference like this one, the last Wednesday, we stay with the University, Autónoma University of Mexico, to talking about different topics of university museum and museums in this challenge of pandemic. And of course, we believe indeed with the networking and integration with different museums and different institutions. And this for this reason, UMAC is a big opportunity to engage other museums, to know how the other university museums works, how the other museums put his collections, works, learning, and teach about the collections, especially contemporary, but we are very curious about others, like anthropological, natural collections, and how made this interchange of collections and knowledge lessons to this special time. But this is all that I try to share with yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Gustavo. And if you haven't had a chance yet, if you could go over to the chat and put some key links to some of your resources online, that would be great. So now the floor is yours, wide open. Everyone who's on the call, there has been some activity over in the chat, if you haven't seen, about the digital divide. Really basically the haves and the have-nots in terms of who has access, whether through hardware or through broadband, high-speed internet. And I would like to propose that that's where we start. I'd like to hear about your experiences in terms of how your constituents, whether it's students or your community, your members, what struggles are you finding in terms of making sure people can actually access your digital materials? I'm not a fan of the Socratic method, but I am going to ask Nicole if she's still with us and doesn't mind chiming in. Your comment about what's happening at University of Pretoria is very interesting. Could you please tell us a little bit more?
Of course. Maybe I should start by saying that South Africa is still very much at the beginning of the crisis. So we have had a very hard lockdown, and as that was implemented in March. But now we are slowly phasing in, or the government is slowly phasing in some relieved strategies and a risk kind of approach where we moved down into different levels. The hard lockdown was level 5, now we're at level 3, which means that the economy is slowly opening up again. People are interacting again, which means that since the beginning of June, when level 3 was instituted, the numbers have actually doubled. So we are now at over or almost at 84,000 infected people. And that means this is still the very beginning. We are, I think, over 3,000 people a day who are newly discovered of having contracted the COVID-19. And of course, this affects schools. While in level 3, some of the schools were allowed to go back, universities have not yet reopened. It's at this stage only essential staff who are allowed back, and postgraduate students or final year students who need to use labs. But all of the museums, including the University of Pretoria museums, are firmly closed, which means that the lockdown period actually gave us a wonderful opportunity to completely redo our website, which we haven't had a chance to do before, but now we've done it. So we've completely revamped the website, and it's, however, very difficult for students to actually access many of our materials because we have so limited staff and resources and funds and so on, so that we actually cannot, we don't actually have the capacity to go into work to actually actively put our collections online or to film in the gallery spaces also. And that makes it incredibly difficult. But we have managed to do a lot of work on the website with new resources over the past several months since the end of March when we were closed. So we, as I mentioned, we redesigned our website, obviously within the limitations given to us by the university. We still have to adhere to the university webpage. We function within the same parameters. We post many news items, news posts, and so on. We have started digitizing our collections, posting online collections. Part of that is the artwork for the week. So we post, depending on the monthly theme that we're working with. For example, June is Youth Day due to the Soweto student uprising in 1976. So we focus on youth art and something that commemorates Youth Day. And so we post artworks online in accordance with these themes. For example, May, of course, being International Museum Month and so on, we worked with those themes. Something that came about that gave us a lot of positive feedback was we launched online puzzles in May as well. Together with another university or museum, which is kind of the public museum of the university. We are the university museum, and then there's the Java Deupi, which is the public version of us, and some of our collections are also with them. And together we've launched online puzzles, which have actually featured in the media, in the news. People are going crazy about them. They're suited to different ages, and we've had immensely positive feedback. We've also launched our first newsletter. So a lot of new firsts all over the show. Our own first online newsletter in May. We posted online opinions and comments. We have gallery images. We launched our social media. We had social media going a while back, but it kind of died down because we didn't have a dedicated marketing person. So we've relaunched that now. So we're on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. And Then last week, I actually offered an online talk to a school in Cape Town about one of our collections, which is featured in the national school curriculum, the archaeological site of Mapungubwe, and immensely positive feedback. So we're definitely going to develop that into a full program for students, for schools to access, and for us to offer these talks more regularly. A lot of new items, but I have to say it is very difficult in South Africa for everybody to actually get access to our websites, to the university resources. We're very fortunate that the University of Pretoria has actually launched a, what do you call it, kind of like a solidarity fund. The government actually started it, kind of a COVID-19 relief solidarity fund. As part of that, they also wanted to provide schools with laptops, with tablets, and they made agreements with various data companies like Telkom, like MTN, and so on, for providing data. Other universities have jumped on the wagon as well, and the University of Pretoria launched its own solidarity fund, asking staff and other people to actually contribute part of their monthly salary to be able to actually provide students who do not have access to laptops and internet-enabled devices, so that they can supply these to the students so that they actually can write online exams, which, by the way, are now due in July. So that was an overload of data.
Thank you, Nicole. Could you also share with us in the chat the link to at least the puzzle page and maybe some others as well? And really wanting to be mindful of the global reach of this conversation, but still staying with the topic for now of the digital divide. I'd love to hear from our colleagues in St. Andrews and in Mexico. So Katie and Anna, if you don't mind saying a few words about the situation you're facing in terms of your constituents having access to digital technology, that would be wonderful. Do we have Katie with us still?
Yes, Katie is there, I think. Katie, are you there? Tell us about St. Andrews. But there's also Kevin. Kevin can also speak about Scotland. Okay, let's move on to Anna and the Mexico City, and then we come back to them. I suggest, yeah. Jill, what do you think?
Perfect.
Well, hello, everybody. The situation of university museums of the UNAM, the National Autonomous University of Mexico, is complex because not all the museums were or follow the same law or direct, or many of them are very different. We have some museums that are part of the government. And for example, one of the biggest museums are 3 parts inside. One is the government of the city, one is the UNAM, and another part is private. Then that is a very, very special museum. Another part of the museums are, most of the museums are part of the humanities. Yes, we only have 3 museums of science. I am one of these museums. And my museum is very particular because this museum is part of an institute, the Geophysics Institute. And now my situation is very difficult because we don't have money. The museum is working well, we have a lot of publics before the pandemic.
But wait, Anna, But
Mhm.
can I suggest that you tell us a little bit more about the impoverished area where your museum is
Yes,
situated, okay?
yes,
Because that creates challenges in terms of access, digital access, and so on. Tell us a
yes,
bit more about
and
that.
that is the problem. We are in one of the most dangerous part of the city of Mexico. And then I noticed, but I noticed with my students, even because I'm giving classes online, and then some of the students of the UNAM leave the courses because they don't have access to internet. And in this part of the city, particularly, that is a very, very big problem. For example, in Mexico for education, they leave it, I think like the last government give for the students of the first grade or no, maybe the sixth grade of basic school, give it an iPad, something like this, to have access. But the problem is not to have the instrument. They needed the modem or the point to be connected. That is one of the problems with the pandemic in Mexico. For example, some of the students have to go to the internet club to have access to the class and remain there many hours with all the problems of the contact, or go to points where they could access to the internet. But like I said before, they were in tourist places that is in the center of the city and not in this part where many of the people live there. That is going to be a big problem. They give us free access. For example, Telmex, that is the company that give access to, I suppose, like more than the 90%. And in other parts of the country, they don't have even electricity. And this is one of the biggest challenge, not only for the museums, even for the education, the normal education. I knew groups, for example, some astronomers that go to these very poor locations, that they went with a car and, for example, observe the stars, and in in the vacations time go to these places and to give education and information about many things. But are the problem now even or more with the pandemic is the problem we are having problems of security. For example, we maintain a net of instruments in many parts of the country, and now
And
we
that's
are
why, sorry to interrupt,
really
and that's one of
problems.
the reasons why you do not have your collections online, for example, right?
For example, for insecurity, I don't have my collection online. Yes. And the other problem is really the outside, the narco traffic is another big problem at this moment. And of course, I noticed that the news are not talking about it, but we have the problem, and we received the order of our rector. Nobody can leave Mexico City or even work in some places of Mexico City to maintain the net of seismographs, for example. We have
Right,
that problem at this moment right now. It's not.
right.
Mhm.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Anna. I wonder if our colleague from Barcelona is still on the line, thinking about one of the hotspots, the early epicenters of COVID.
Alphonse is here and very active on the chat. You have to unmute yourself, Alphonse.
Well, hello, how are you? What do you know? What do you want to know about Barcelona?
Going digital.
Where's the best bar? No, I'm just kidding.
Sorry?
I said, where is the best bar? But I'm teasing. I'd love to know if you have been hit by some of the same digital challenges in terms of getting your material out there, but also making sure that the students the students for your university have, like Anna, had some of the same issues in terms of lack of computers, lack of hardware, lack of internet, but also any challenges that may have been unique to you during the lockdown period in particular.
Well, well, the situation is my museum is not tied to the University of Barcelona. We depend on the College of Physicians of Barcelona, so we are a private institution. But the University of Barcelona, they don't have a university museum physically. They just have a virtual museum in the city, in the university. So I don't know if they use their collections with their students in a normal and daily way. But I can say from our institution, from our point of view, that we have been working a lot from this area of digitalization of our collections in so many ways, not as much as the case of Gustavo. They are really very hard working people. But well, I think that we are doing very interesting work in this area in order to reach audiences and in order to create contents to be used for, especially in the Masters of History of Science in Barcelona and in Valencia. We're working with at this level, not with pre-graduate students, and well, this is mainly our relationship with the university. So, well,
Great. And can I ask something, Jill? And
yes.
Well, you absolutely must come next week to give your experience, Alphonse, about how you switch from teaching to online and so on, because that's a challenge.
Okay.
Especially if you teach with collections.
Yes.
And I was going to ask if because when do you know if learning physically is different from learning digitally? Okay, so it's a whole different set of tools that people need and attention and so on. So do you feel that there is a divide there too, in sense of the professionals, whether historians or museum professionals, museum educators, they feel to have some training in those areas because it's a completely different world, right?
Yes, well, as you know, and you know this better than me. Historians of science are very well too much accustomed to text sources, and they have a poor training in the material culture of science, and this is a real problem because well, it's something like a vicious circle, because they don't integrate this kind of sources in their teaching and neither in their research. But they speak about instruments, they speak about images, but not with this materiality as the primary source. Well, this is a very long.
No, it's good. It's good. Did anyone feel this, that the staff had some difficulties, some challenges in terms of tools? I don't want to replace you, Jill, please.
Well, that's fun. You're funny because I was literally typing that question in the chat box as you were speaking those words. So I was curious to know what challenges your team members have encountered, and also all of you, if you are in a position of leadership, you know that you have new responsibilities now in terms of um, really the well-being, the emotional, mental, and sometimes physical well-being of your teams, in addition to keeping your mission on track as the ground is constantly shifting. So I am curious to know not only about digital challenges you and your team members may be facing or have faced, but also the bigger picture too, the meta of the challenges that you all are working through each day.
Of course, we learn every day. It's a challenge every day for us. In the beginning, we are not very useful for us. This platform that is Zoom or Teams or other ones, but or Facebook Live. And we are forced with the necessity to introduce more contents in Facebook Live, Instagram, TV, and other platforms. But the advantage is we have a good foundations with contents, and we know our collections, and for the reason we can goes through these new ways and try to focus in each special the social networks to put a special attentions how the our followers and our subscribers demands. And at this moment we made a special video because one of the biggest artists in Colombia, Alejandro Obregón, is our anniversary, and we contact different criticals, artists, people that knows this artist, and we made two videos. I put in after in the chat, and oh, it's amazing because the other museum, especially the National Museum for Colombia, then can do these ones, and we have the value to stay in contact directly with the artists and with the students, with the critics. And we think that the museum is not only the building. I understand the museum is the people. It's more important the people and the relationship with the people that made this for this strong. Because only the building is empty, but with the people, the building have a new ways, a new vision, and this is our experience in this time.
Thank you. And I am mindful of the time. We have about 10 more minutes together. So I do want to open the floor if there are questions or topics. And again, don't feel like you need to stick with digital. But if there's something that you all would like to address, please feel free to bring it up now. Anna.
We received a proposal to do small videos, didactic videos showing some effects, but I write especially a manual in the way that these videos can be published by the UNAM, because many people think that divulgation is only to speak easy or something like this, no? But we follow a very strict development with the basis of the same basis that we revise or qualificate some publication to be online by the UNAM. And then I did a manual of the, for example, free the images and everything that be used in this kind of videos has to be free or things like this, because it's very important to maintain the property of the authors of many of the information, for example. And we are doing small videos too with the persons of that give the guide visits of the museums. We are going to develop small videos. We are doing that, a small video or animation with small topics of the museums to be used in classes or of the people that visit the page, because we receive a lot of visits, many visits we receive for our page in Facebook, for example, in this moment of the problem of the COVID. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think to revert to Mark's earlier point about our mindfulness session, one of the upsides, the silver linings of digital is the infinite reach, really. It's really, the potential is remarkable. Yeah. I did have a question, which is off topic. I'm curious because, as I'm sure you're aware, the US model for funding of museums, including embedded or academic art museums, is very highly dependent on external support from private donors and from corporations. So we are all working to a model of between 30 and 75% drop in donations. The Low has already furloughed 2 individuals way back in early May, and regrettably we had to lay off or permanently terminate 2 positions just a few weeks ago. So I am curious to know what is happening in the rest of the world in terms of employment status. Are you finding yourself in a similar situation with budgets shrinking rapidly, leaving you with very, very difficult choices?
I told you that the UNAM have very different situations for every museum. For example, the University of Contemporary Art, it has a model that is very different of all the other UNAM museums. We notice and we comment with other directors in Oaxaca, in the Reimagine Museum meeting. And then we notice that they have different conditions than the other, because we can receive direct money for our museum. For example, if some person wants to give us money to maintain the museum, we can receive direct money. The money has to be received by the UNAM direct, and they take 20%. And
the situation is very different.
It's very, very different. For example, that is the reason that I say that every museum in the UNAM is quite different.
They are mixed, but but I don't think the US, I think the US university museums in general, well, not all, but they are the most vulnerable in the sense that they do not depend, they don't have the stability of the state funds, you know, of the federal
yes,
money.
But for example, me, I don't receive the money direct for the central administrator. That is another problem. I receive the money
from the institute,
from my institute, and then
because you are
the situation is worse even.
And that creates different situations for layoffs and stuff.
Exactly. Exactly. And just as a point of information to Marta's point about academic museums in the US being vulnerable, about 50%, it really hovers between 49 and 51 in my research of our funding, no matter how big or small we are, comes from our parent organizations. And that tends to cover staff and nothing more. So unless you have large endowments and dedicated funds, most of us have to raise money each and every year for our exhibitions and our allied programs. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we are closing out now. We have about 5 minutes left. We've had a very active chat, but I do want to make sure that we have touched upon any burning questions that you all might have.
You know, I have a question. It's kind of late to raise these questions. It's complicated, but anyway, don't you think that, okay, you have art, and art is easier to put online because you just, okay, it's the image and you always connect with images no matter what, okay? But for example, if you're a science center, I'm really sorry that there are no science centers here, but they're really, I mean, doomed, because you have to touch, you have to interact really. So it's a situation more similar to the students when you're teaching with, that we're going to discuss next week, when you really are teaching with objects. It's a completely different world, different type of tools, and you flatten everything through the digital. So you eliminate, and I don't know what's the situation of science centers in universities. There's many in the US, by the way. I'm trying to reach them so that they can get more engaged in our UMAC community, because we don't have that many. But that's a problem, because I mean, when will they reopen and how will they reopen? How can they, you know, yeah.
I agree. Kirsten, did you have something to add?
Yeah, well, we do have a lot of scientific collections, so I would like to sort of respond on that. I also do believe it's very, very difficult for us to, especially, which we'll be discussing next week, teaching with our object is really a problem. We're not teaching this semester, but next semester. And we have been allowed to sort of do like a semi thing. We are sort of online, but with a smaller group of people who can also be at the different collections and really, you know, touch the things and stuff. Of course, we have hygiene regulations and distance regulations, those kind of stuff, but we have not found a way so far to really teach and work solely digital with our things. It's just, so I'm really, really curious what people say next week to that problem. Of course, we have been developing a lot of different kinds of programs.
Moderating.
What's that?
You'll be moderating.
Yes, I know. So still, I'm really interested in what people are going to say. This is a really interesting topic for us. So anyway, so we have been developing a lot of other things, like we did we put up a new website, we have a YouTube channel now, we have all different kinds of stuff. But still, it's not the same. And basically, me and my staff, we're pretty much saying, well, look, this is what we're in for. We're here because we want to work with those things and not without them. So it's caused sort of a problem in terms of, this is not what we're sort of bargained for. So now we have to find a solution for that. So I'm really, really interested in what people are going to say next week to teaching with collections.
I had a quick comment about that. It's in no way a solution, but a challenge that recently arose where a professor received a grant to develop a digital interactive at the Low. This is going to happen over the course of starting in the fall of 2020 to the spring of 2021, but it's a digital interactive, so it's highly problematic. So we're pivoting to try to explore motion gesture technologies, right? So you don't physically touch the device, but they're quite affordable. Again, this is not meant to be a solution. Nothing replaces human interaction and a tactile experience. But we're being forced to figure something out because he's going to create this object that nobody's going to touch. So that's a big problem. So my point is, it's an interesting area to experiment with, motion gesture technologies, which are actually relatively affordable at this point. I mean, there are objects in US dollars that are like $200 that, you know, sends out an invisible beam that reads your movement and then interacts. But the other thing I was just going to quickly say, that these challenges keep going on, and two things that I've seen in technology that are useful in trying to mitigate this problem. It doesn't solve it because, like I said, nothing beats physically touching something. But 3D documentation of objects and the software that allows you to digitally manipulate those is a growing field, an area that's also become very accessible in terms of price point. And then also figuring out how to, this gets back to the issue of access and socioeconomic issues, but when and where personal devices can be used and employed in galleries is going to become more and more relevant. And the last thing on that note is, the utilization of AR, augmented reality experiences, also helping to create, again, what we're trying, the idea is something of an immersive experience, which we can't get physically now. So what other technologies offer some level of immersion? Anyway, I just wanted to share those points.
Perfect. Thank you, Mark. And thank you all. I think that that's where we will leave it because it's the perfect bridge to Kirsten's conversation for us next week. So it's lovely to see so many people from all over the world. And thank you, Marta, for bringing us together.
And thank you, Jill, so much for your brilliant moderation. Thank you all for participating orally in the chat. The chat is super, super rich. I think it's one of the best chats we've ever had, you know, really good. And yeah, I'm also, I have to say that I'm grateful to the University of Lisbon for providing the platform, and I'll see you all next week, I hope, for the 4th webinar, which will be, as you know, we talked about it, about students and going digital with students and teaching. And it will be moderated in the Asian edition by Alistair Kwan from New Zealand, and in exactly at this hour, by Kirsten Vincenz from Germany, from Dresden. So if you want to participate, you already know what to do. Go online to our website. You can also see on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel. And yeah, we'll see you next week. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you a lot. Good. Enjoyed your weekend.
Thank you.